They told my daughter she wasn't invited. After she'd spent 3 days cooking, hand-rolling pastries, and even making Grandma's favorite peach cobbler from scratch. My name is Michelle, and from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever watched your child be treated like they're invisible and had to decide, right then, what kind of mother you are? Because when I saw her standing there in the kitchen, apron covered in flour, eyes wide after reading the text my dad sent, I felt something snap. Change of plans. We're doing a restaurant instead. Adults only. That's it. No apology. No explanation. Just a decision made without her. After she'd planned the entire menu, made handmade place cards, even decorated the dining room for my mother's 68th birthday. My daughter, Emma, whispered, "Did I do something wrong?" I looked her dead in the eye and said, "No, baby." But they just did. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone. I simply texted back one word to my dad. Understood. Then I picked up the phone and started making other plans. Not out of spite, but because I wasn't going to let them teach my daughter that her effort was disposable. They wanted an adults-only party? Fine. But the celebration we were about to host would be unforgettable. That night, while my parents were clinking wine glasses at some overpriced seafood spot, Emma and I were lighting candles in our backyard. I called a few close friends, people who actually valued her. We laid out the feast she had made. Every dish. And what happened next? Well, let's just say word spreads fast when there's a party with real love in the air. By midnight, our yard was full. Neighbors. Emma's teachers. Even the local bakery owner. She once helped carry flour bags. They brought music. They brought wine. And 15 hours later, just as the sun rose and we were laughing over leftover cobbler, there was a knock on the front door. Then pounding. The door started shaking. Guess who finally showed up? Too late. Too guilty. Too exposed. It was my mother, still in her makeup from the night before, hair tousled, clutching her designer coat like it was armor. Behind her, my dad stood stiff, his mouth a tight line. He didn't look like a man arriving to celebrate. He looked like someone arriving to contain damage. I didn't open the door right away. I watched them through the peephole for a full 10 seconds. Let them feel it. Let them wait. Then I opened it. "Oh, good," I said, leaning casually against the frame. "You're finally here. Peach cobbler's all gone, though." My mother blinked. "You had the party here?" After we said. I stepped aside just enough for them to see behind me. Emma, still in pajamas, laughing with her art teacher at the kitchen table. Plates stacked high. Music still humming low from a Bluetooth speaker. There was warmth in that room. The kind they hadn't earned. "You said it was adults only," I said calmly. "So we honored that. We only invited grown-ups, people who don't treat a 16-year-old like staff." Dad cleared his throat. "It was just a misunderstanding. Your mother didn't mean to exclude her." My jaw clenched. I stayed silent. Let the silence speak. Because yes, they meant it. They just didn't expect consequences. My mother's voice softened, the fake version she uses when she's losing control. "You're blowing this out of proportion, Michelle. The restaurant wasn't going to allow minors. We didn't think it would matter." I cut in. Her mouth hung open. "You didn't think, Mom. Emma cooked for 3 days. You knew that. You told me to have her make your favorite sweet potatoes. She made them. She set the table. She even ironed napkins." "She's a child," my father snapped, suddenly defensive. "This wasn't her responsibility." "Exactly," I said, my voice dropping. "But she wanted to honor you. And you told her, without a shred of grace, that she wasn't welcome." They stood there, frozen in the threshold. I tilted my head. "Tell me, what hurts more? Being excluded? Or realizing the people you excluded threw a better party without you?" I didn't wait for an answer. I closed the door, gently, not in anger, but with finality. And on the other side of that door, Emma looked up at me, eyes searching. "You okay, Mom?" I smiled. "I'm perfect, baby. Let's reheat the mac and cheese." Because sometimes revenge isn't loud. It's warm. And it doesn't knock first. It opens the door to people who never left. By Monday, the phone calls started. First my aunt, then my cousin, then the real kicker, a voicemail from my dad that began with, "This family has always respected tradition." I listened with the same care I'd give a junk mail ad, because now I saw it clearly. Their definition of tradition meant compliance. Politeness over truth. Image over impact. Emma came home from school holding it together, barely. "Grandma didn't look at me in the hallway," she said quietly. "She turned away like I wasn't there." My heart twisted. This wasn't just about a birthday party anymore. It was about the pattern. The way they dismissed anyone who didn't fit their mold. Emma, with her bold spirit, her love of baking, her neurodivergent brilliance they never tried to understand, she was a reminder of everything they couldn't control. And they punished her with silence. I sat her down that night and pulled out a stack of photo albums. Page after page, birthdays, Easters, anniversaries. Do you know what I noticed? Emma was in the photos, but never celebrated in them. Always helping. Never the guest of honor. "I used to think I just didn't like parties," she said, tracing a picture with her finger. "But maybe I just didn't like their parties." My throat tightened. "They don't get to decide your worth," I whispered. "And they definitely don't get to silence your joy." She gave me a small nod, but I could see it. Something had cracked. A piece of her childhood belief that family always means safe. And I knew, as her mother, I had two options. Let that crack widen into cynicism, or fill it with something stronger than their coldness. So I made a decision. We were going to throw another party. This time for Emma. No occasion, no permission, no formal RSVP. Just a celebration of her existence. I booked the community center. I called her favorite local band. I even ordered a custom cake with one word written in gold. Scene. And when I posted the invitation online, I didn't tag anyone from my family. But word travels fast in a small town. The same people who uninvited her were now wondering why the whole town was suddenly RSVPing yes to the one party where their names weren't even mentioned. And that silence was starting to burn. The day of Emma's celebration, I watched her walk into the community center wearing a soft gold dress she'd picked herself. She looked radiant. Not in the polished way my family admired, no. She glowed from the inside out. Every guest who entered brought something: cookies, handmade cards, even flowers from their own gardens. People who'd seen her grow up. People who remembered when she donated her lemonade stand money to rebuild a neighbor's porch after a storm. She wasn't just invited that day. She was honored. And yet, there was one table in the far corner. Empty. Reserved for someone who probably wouldn't come. But I left it there anyway. A symbolic space. Around 5 p.m., as the music swelled and Emma laughed in a circle of friends, I noticed a familiar luxury car slow roll through the parking lot. It didn't park. Didn't even stop fully. Just hovered. And then pulled away. My father. He couldn't even bring himself to come inside. He just watched. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was fear of accountability. But what it looked like was cowardice. Inside, I didn't let it touch our energy. Emma was mid-speech. Yes, she made one herself, thanking people for believing in me, even when I forgot how to believe in myself. I bit my lip to keep from crying. And then, the crowd parted. My sister, Megan, stepped in. Late, unsure, holding something wrapped in paper. Emma stiffened. They hadn't spoken in almost a year. Megan had always been the golden niece. The one who got the family look and knew how to stay on script. But right then she looked different. Small. Nervous. "I didn't come for Mom and Dad," she said, voice trembling. "I came for her." She handed Emma the wrapped package. Inside, a framed photo of them as toddlers, baking cookies in Grandma's kitchen. "I was too scared to stand up for you," Megan said softly. "But I'm here now." The room stilled. Emma blinked fast, tears rising. "Thank you," she whispered. Megan reached for her hand, and the two of them, so different, yet bound by blood and 1,000 silences, stood together under the string lights. Later that night, Megan pulled me aside. You know Dad's been talking to a lawyer, right? I blinked. About what? She looked down. He's rewriting his will. But don't worry, that ship might have already sunk. I didn't ask more, because I knew then. The ripples of our quiet stand were reaching shores they never imagined. It started with a knock. 15 hours after the party ended, just as I was cleaning up leftover decorations and rinsing dishes, the door started shaking like someone was desperate to break through. I opened it slowly. My mother stood there, tight-lipped, eyes rimmed red, still dressed like she'd come from church, except her hands were shaking and she wasn't holding her Bible. "We need to talk," she said. No hello, no apology, just entitlement wrapped in pearls and perfume. I didn't move. I simply folded my arms. "You made a spectacle," she hissed. "Posting photos, inviting people outsiders, and making your father look like a monster." I held her gaze. He did that himself when he texted a child that she wasn't welcome. She flinched, but only for a second. "I raised you better than this," she snapped. "No," I said, voice steady. "You raised me to smile through mistreatment. You raised me to value appearances over people. You didn't raise me to protect. You raised me to perform." Her breath caught. "You think that party makes you a better parent?" "No," I replied. "Emma does. The way she holds space for others, the way she forgives, the way she still hoped you'd show up, even after you erased her. That's what makes me proud." She didn't speak. For the first time, she looked uncertain. Then, she took a trembling breath. "Your father's rewriting this state. He's hurt. And he's angry." I almost laughed. "So, this isn't a visit. It's a warning." She didn't deny it. She just looked past me into the house. "You're making a mistake. He won't change his mind." I stepped forward and gently closed the door halfway. "I'm not asking him to. Let him keep the inheritance. Let him clutch it like it buys him absolution. I don't want it." Her eyes widened. "You're throwing away millions over a child's feelings?" "No," I said calmly. "I'm protecting my daughter's soul. You taught me the cost of neglect. I'm teaching her the value of worth." And then I shut the door. Behind it, my hands were trembling. But inside me, there was no doubt. Because when you break cycles, it doesn't come with applause. It comes with slammed doors, trembling voices, late-night visits filled with veiled threats. But I wasn't a scared daughter anymore. I was the mother who said enough. And, in that silence, I heard something new. The sound of legacy shifting. 2 days later, I got a letter. Not an email. Not a call. A thick envelope. Cream-colored. Hand-delivered. From a law office in our town. Same one my dad had used for decades. I knew before opening it. But what I didn't expect was how detailed it was. Page after page spelling out how my parents were removing me and my daughter from every trust, every property deed, every long-promised inheritance. No college fund. No share in the family vacation home. No access to the family foundation I helped build when I was barely out of college. Signed. Stamped. Witnessed. Their revenge was legal. Their cruelty official. But what struck me most was the tone. Cold. Surgical. As if I was a liability being erased from a spreadsheet. Emma walked in while I was still holding the letter. She took one look at my face and froze. "Mom," I turned slowly. I wanted to hide it, to shield her. But I also knew I couldn't lie. "They cut us out," I said. She didn't blink. She stepped forward, took the letter, skimmed it with calm I didn't know she had. And then, "Good," she said. I stared. "Emma?" "No, Mom," she said firmly. "They did it when they uninvited me. This is just them admitting it on paper." I never felt prouder of her than I did in that moment. But something still burned in me. Not anger. Not regret. Resolve. I spent the next 3 days making calls. Not to lawyers. To people. The ones who came to the party. Who posted photos. Who whispered things to me on their way out like, "Your father always did play favorites," or "It's about time someone in your family did right by that girl." Turns out, That little party stirred something. And not just in our town. A local journalist had written a heartfelt blog post about it. The girl the birthday forgot. By the end of the week, it went viral. Thousands of shares. National outlets picked it up. Talk shows called asking for interviews. I refused them all. But something bigger happened. A nonprofit in New York, one focused on teens left behind by family trauma, reached out. They wanted Emma to speak at their youth gala. They'd pay for travel, hotel, the whole thing. Because her story was resonating. Not because it was unique, but because it was far too common. And in her pain, she gave others language. My parents had erased her from a table. But now? She was being handed a stage. The ballroom was golden. Hundreds of guests. Ceiling lit like a dusk sky. Cameras flashing softly in corners while servers passed around sparkling cider. And there, on a stage barely 2 feet high, stood Emma, 16 years old, wearing the same burgundy dress she baked in days ago, with sleeves rolled up and flour on her cheek. Except now her back was straight, her voice clear. She told a story without bitterness. Not once did she mention my parents' names. She simply said, I cooked for people who said they loved me. Then they said, I wasn't invited. And it hurt. But something surprising happened. Strangers showed up instead. People who saw me, ate with me, danced with me. And I realized, maybe love isn't about blood. Maybe it's about who pulls up a chair when everyone else walks away. The room was silent. Not politely, but reverently. Then someone stood and clapped. Then another. Then the entire ballroom. People wept. A senator's wife whispered to me in the lobby, she's what this country needs more of. Back at the hotel, Emma collapsed on the bed, laughing nervously. Was that okay? I held her face in my hands. You just turned pain into power, baby. That was more than okay. The next morning things changed. Not publicly, but intimately. I got a message from my brother. The one who had always stayed quiet. Who watched from the sidelines while I got passed over, silenced, shamed for standing up. He wrote, I saw the video. I had no idea. I'm sorry I didn't stand up sooner. Mom and Dad are furious. But honestly, they should be. He told me something else, too. That my parents were scrambling. That board members of the family foundation were concerned about their public image. That a few were even threatening to step down if things didn't change. Apparently, the optics of cutting out your granddaughter after a viral teen speech doesn't sit well with donors. Still, I wasn't interested in vengeance. I didn't need them to grovel. Didn't need the money back. Didn't need fake apologies. What I needed was already here. My daughter. Braver than I ever was at 16. Loved not by obligation but by choice. And as we boarded the plane back home, she leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, I think I want to start something for other girls like me. That's when I knew this story wasn't about a party. It was about a spark. One they tried to blow out and only made brighter. It started with a name. Emma came into my room one night with a sketch pad clutched to her chest. She said, I want to call it the Table Project. I blinked. The what? She grinned. You know, for girls like me, girls who got left out, I want to build a space for them. Real tables. Virtual ones. Where they always have a seat. I sat there stunned. All I'd wanted was to protect her. But somehow, through all the pain, she had found purpose. We launched a small website. No fancy PR. No big budget. Just a few words. Everyone deserves a seat. And if they don't give you one, we'll build you a table. Within days, donations poured in. Not from celebrities. Not from corporations. From single moms. From teachers. From grandmothers who said, this reminds me of what they did to my daughter. A local community center offered free space. A bakery donated food for our first event. The same one that delivered that chocolate cake to our tiny, defiant dinner party. By spring, Emma was hosting monthly gatherings for teens. By summer, the Table Project had a grant from a women-led foundation. By fall, a publisher approached her about a book. And my parents? They watched it all unfold. They saw their granddaughter on television. Saw people cheer for the girl who got forgotten and refused to stay quiet. My dad called once. Left a voicemail. Said, "We made a mistake. Can we talk?" But Emma? She listened to it, deleted it, then said calmly, "It's not my job to help them sleep at night." I didn't disagree. Because here's the truth. Forgiveness is powerful, but boundaries are holy. We didn't seek revenge. We sought healing. And sometimes, the sweetest justice isn't slamming a door. It's opening a new one. One they no longer have the key to. So now, every time a girl walks through the doors of the Table Project and sits down, I remember that text my father sent. It's adults only. And I smile. Because my daughter? She made her own guest list. And this time, no one gets left out. You'll never be anything. No one will ever take you seriously. That's what they said. Laughed. Right at dinner. Over pot roast and red wine, with smug faces and raised eyebrows like I was the family joke. The next day, my father's boss walked into that same house. He looked me dead in the eye, saluted, and said, "Good morning, Senator." Their forks dropped. "My name is Claire Mitchell, and from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever had the people closest to you look right through you, like you were invisible in your own home? That night, I felt it more than ever. It was my father's 65th birthday, some grand retirement dinner at our family estate. White linens, crystal glasses, and 25 people who hadn't called me in years suddenly pretending we were so proud of Claire. But it didn't last. My brother Paul raised a glass. To the real achievers in the family, he said. People who chose real jobs. Not campaigns and Twitter arguments. Laughter followed. Even Dad chuckled. Then he added, "Sweetheart, politics isn't real work. No one takes it seriously until you're, well, someone real." Another sip of wine. Another stab to the heart. I sat there, 34, single, exhausted from 3 years of endless campaigning, building grassroots movements from scratch, going door to door in the rain just to get people to believe in something again. But at that table, I was still just Claire who writes speeches and thinks she's important. Mom leaned over at dessert and whispered, "Why don't you go back to consulting? You made good money there. These public service games, they're not who we are." I didn't cry, didn't argue, didn't raise my voice. I just smiled and stood up, tapped my glass, and said, "Thank you all for reminding me exactly why I do what I do." They blinked. Some smirked. Paul muttered, "Here we go." I left before the cake was cut, because I knew something they didn't. That in the morning, my name was going to be on every newspaper in the state. That the governor himself had called me an hour before dinner. And that soon, they'd all be eating their words with a side of regret. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was nervous, but because I could feel it. The shift. The turning. The moment the world changes. Not with a scream, but a whisper in the dark that says, "It's time." By 6 a.m., my phone was already vibrating off the nightstand. Missed calls, texts, emails. CNN had picked it up. So had the Times. Claire Mitchell wins historic Senate seat in upset victory. Historic. The first independent woman in my state's history to ever claim that chair. And I had done it without a political dynasty, without corporate backers, without a famous last name. I did it with volunteers who knocked on 75,000 doors. With nurses and veterans and teachers by my side. With truth. And grit. At 7:10 a.m., I stepped into my childhood home. Not to gloat, but because I'd promised my father's boss, Mr. Langston, a courtesy visit before the press conference. He liked formality. And he'd always been kind to me, even when Dad rolled his eyes behind my back. When I walked into the dining room, they were still finishing breakfast. Mom, Dad, Paul, his wife Tracy, same polished expressions, same low hum of judgment. Then Mr. Langston walked in behind me. He didn't greet Dad first. Didn't even look at Paul. He went straight to me, extended his hand. "Good morning, Senator Mitchell." Then, he saluted. Military style. Sharp. Respectful. Loud enough for everyone to hear. Forks clinked against china. Mom dropped her coffee spoon. Dad's face went pale. Paul looked like he swallowed his tongue. Langston turned to them. I assume you've prepared the congratulations, he said, smiling but tight-lipped. They hadn't.
Of course they hadn't.
And suddenly all the things they used to mock. The late nights, the town halls, the bus rides, the protests, they mattered. Because someone with power had acknowledged me. And in that house, that was the only language they'd ever respected. But I didn't need their applause. What I had planned next was far more satisfying. Paul chased me out to the porch 15 minutes later, his voice sticky with fake sweetness. Claire, hey, wait up. That was unexpected. Congratulations, I guess.
Senator?
That's big. He sounded like a used car salesman. The kind who called women sweetheart, right before lowballing them. I didn't stop walking. Just said, thanks, over my shoulder. He jogged beside me, trying to keep up. We should celebrate. As a family, right? I mean, this is a huge win for all of us. I stopped.
Turned.
All of us. Raised an eyebrow. You mean us that laughed at me last night like I was a clown in a pantsuit? His smile faltered. Come on, Claire. You know we were just teasing. We always tease. No, Paul. You belittle. There's a difference. He kept talking, but I wasn't listening anymore. Because behind those words, I saw the panic in his eyes. The real reason he was suddenly being nice. See, Paul had been working at Langston's firm for the past 2 years. He'd weaseled his way into middle management, bragging about being next in line for VP. But Mr. Langston wasn't a fool. He'd told me privately 2 months ago, Paul's days were numbered. The firm was moving in a new direction, and well, Paul wasn't it. Langston had also hinted that with my new seat, he'd be revisiting the firm's federal contract. The one worth millions. The one Paul managed. And suddenly, the man who once said I'd never be taken seriously was desperate for my approval. I could have crushed him right then. But revenge, if you do it right, isn't loud. It's a whisper, followed by silence. So I smiled. I'm late for an interview, Paul. But hey, maybe one day you'll work on my campaign. I hear we're hiring interns.
He blinked.
Swallowed. I got in my car, rolled down the window. Tell Dad I'll send him the press kit. Since he said politics wasn't real work, I'd love for him to see what real looks like. And with that, I drove off. Not toward vengeance, but something better. Victory that doesn't ask permission. I wasn't even out of the driveway when Mom's text came through. Proud of you. Call me? I stared at it like it might bite. Proud? Where was that pride when I came home crying at 17 because my campaign flyers were ripped down? Where was her pride when Dad told the family I was just playing pretend politics while Paul handled real business?
No.
This wasn't pride. This was proximity to power. I didn't reply. Instead, I turned up the volume on the radio. Local news was already covering my win, calling it a political earthquake. A changing of the guard. I smiled. Then I pulled into my campaign office downtown. My team was buzzing, dozens of text calls, cameras being set up, interviews lined up back to back. But I only cared about one thing that day. The education budget hearing. The one Dad had laughed at me for even proposing. He once said, "You can't fix the system, Claire. Just get a real job."
Well,
I had one now. And that morning, I walked into the Capitol with a fully drafted bill in my hand, co-sponsored by 3 senators, backed by the union, and funded by cuts to Dad's firm's bloated government contract. When I laid it on the desk in that marble chamber, every lobbyist in the room froze. Because I wasn't just Senator Mitchell. I was the girl who knew where the bodies were buried, who knew how the money flowed, and exactly who had padded their pockets, including the firm Paul worked for, including the contractor my father mentored. You could feel the tension shift in the room. They used to say my name like a punchline. Now they said it like a warning. And I hadn't even started yet. That night, as I left the building, my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Later, I listened. It was Dad. His voice was thin.
Tight.
Claire, I saw what you did today. We should talk. Maybe we misunderstood each other. Misunderstood?
No.
He understood perfectly. He just never thought the girl in his shadow would be the one casting it. 3 days later, Dad showed up at my office. No call. No appointment. Just appeared. He looked smaller. Not physically, but like something inside him had been hollowed out. He waited by the receptionist's desk like a stranger. I let him wait for 26 minutes. Then I walked out, clipboard in hand, pretending I was in a rush. Because I was. But not for him. Claire, he said, standing too quickly. 5 minutes. That's all I ask. I looked him dead in the eyes. 5 minutes. That's all I gave you 12 years ago. Remember? When I asked if I could take a leadership role at the company and you laughed. Said I should let the men handle the future. He shifted, embarrassed. Things were different then.
No, Dad.
You were different. I was always like this. You just didn't see it. I could feel my staff watching. But I didn't care. Let them hear. Let them witness.
He sighed.
Look, I get it. I was wrong. But you're a senator now. That's huge. You don't have to punish us. Punish? Like my life had been some kind of revenge fantasy. Like I hadn't bled and clawed and burned through every ounce of dignity just to survive being his daughter. You don't get to frame this as punishment, I said quietly. You gave Paul the company. You gave him your name, your money, your support. All I had was silence and spite. That was your choice. This, I gestured around, was mine. He nodded, swallowing hard. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folder. Langston's firm is collapsing. Paul, he's on the verge of being let go. There's a contract under review, and we know it's tied to your education bill. If you could just... I didn't even take the folder. I leaned in, smiling faintly. You remember what you said when I asked for help after grad school? When I begged for a job? He looked at me, silent. You said, life isn't fair, Claire. Grow up. I turned to go,
but paused.
Looks like you're finally growing up, too. And just like that, I walked away. The daughter he tried to silence had become the woman whose silence now spoke louder than his name. The next blow didn't come from me. It came from the ethics committee. Turns out, one of the firms bidding for the state school contracts had ghost subsidiaries tracing back to guess who? Langston Holdings. The same firm Paul now ran. Thanks to Daddy's blessing. My office didn't have to lift a finger.
Journalists did the rest.
Within 48 hours, the headlines were everywhere. New senator's bill exposes decade-long embezzlement ring. Langston tied to shell accounts through senator's father's former company. And my phone rang nonstop. Not with panic. With congratulations. From senators. From watchdog groups. Even from people I hadn't heard from in years. But not from Paul. Not until the morning the feds raided Langston's offices. That morning, he called me from a blocked number. I answered. I don't know why. Maybe to hear it. To finally hear the fear in his voice. Claire, he said, breathless. You have to make it stop. Make what stop? All of it. The investigation. The press. They're digging into everything. They pulled my emails. My wife is freaking out. My job's on the line. Dad's a mess. He hasn't slept. You proved your point, okay? I let the silence grow. Just long enough to feel the weight of his unraveling. Then I said calmly, I didn't prove my point.
You did.
By doing exactly what Dad taught you to do. Cut corners, hide secrets, and assume the world would clean up after you. His voice broke. I could go to jail. I didn't flinch. You should have thought about that before you raised your glass to a room full of people and toasted to the real heir of the Mitchell name. I hung up, and for the first time since that cursed dinner, I exhaled. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about cleansing. Purging years of silence. Decades of being underestimated. That night, I stood in my apartment overlooking the city. The same city that once ignored me. Now lit up with my name. And I whispered to myself, you didn't just take their seat at the table. You built your own damn table and set it on fire. A week later, I received an invitation. It was handwritten, formal, elegant. Mitchell family emergency dinner. mandatory attendance. At my father's estate. I laughed. They were still trying to run this like a boardroom, like I was still their employee, like they had the power. But something inside me said,
Go.
not for them, for you.
So I did.
I wore black, not because I was mourning, but because I wanted them to. When I walked into that old stone mansion, I expected fireworks.
Tears. Rage.
Desperation. What I got was worse. Silence. Paul was already seated. He looked like a ghost.
Thinner. Pale.
Sweating through his collar. My mother tried to smile, lips trembling. And Dad? He stood when I entered. For the first time in my life, he stood for me. Claire, he said, voice low. Thank you for coming. I sat without a word. Let them speak first. Paul cleared his throat. I lost the job. The board let me go. We had to put the house on the market. Dad nodded solemnly. The firm is under full investigation. I've retained a lawyer. I sipped my water. Waited. Mom finally said it. We need help. There it was. The real reason for the invitation. I looked around at the mahogany walls. The dusty portraits of patriarchs past. The gleam of silver that once fed generations who denied me a seat. And I said what they never expected. You remember that summer I begged to go to leadership camp and you said it was a waste on girls? That it was better to focus on finding a husband? Dad winced. Well, I went anyway. I cleaned toilets at a motel to pay for it. And when I got there, I learned something no one in this house ever taught me, how to lead with dignity. They stayed silent. I stood up slowly. Gather my bag. You taught me how to survive. But I taught myself how to win. At the door, I turned. Good luck with the investigation. Tell your lawyer I recommend full transparency. It's the only thing that might save what little you have left. Then I walked out. And for the first time, they didn't follow me. A month passed, then another. I didn't hear from them again. Not a word. But I did see my last name everywhere. Not theirs.
Mine.
Senator Claire Mitchell pushes historic transparency bill through Senate. From overlooked daughter to political powerhouse, her rise is changing everything. People stop me on the street now, not for selfies, but to thank me. Veterans, working mothers, young girls with hope in their eyes. One of them, maybe 10 years old, ran up to me outside City Hall one morning. She looked up and said, "My mom said you didn't wait for permission. You just did it." I knelt down and smiled. That's exactly right. And then she asked the one question that shattered me. Are they proud of you now? I paused, looked at her small hands, then at the sky. I don't think it matters anymore. And I meant it. You see, I stopped needing their applause. The day I realized they feared my voice, because it wasn't theirs to control. The family company folded, auctioned off to pay legal fees. The legacy they thought would bury me
Was gone. But mine?
It was just beginning. I bought the old estate a year later, not out of spite, but to build a refuge, a leadership academy, for girls they would have called too much, too smart, too bold, too loud. I named it the Claire House, and on the plaque at the gate, it reads, "Here, no one waits to be chosen. They choose themselves." The dinner table that once felt like a battlefield, I burned it and built around one. Everyone gets a seat. No one's voice is too soft or too sharp, because I learned power isn't inherited. It's reclaimed. And the moment you stop asking for a place, you realize the whole house was yours to begin with.